Okay, good evening. 6 o'clock and welcome to the May 2nd governing body meeting. Call this meeting to order. If you will give your attention to Deputy Mayor Dobler, who's going to provide the invocation. Stand as you are able and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's bow our heads. Lord, thank you for the opportunity to gather tonight to do good things for the city of Topeka. Please watch over those who watch over us, the Topeka Police Department, Topeka Fire Department, those folks that keep us safe. Watch over those who are on the street, fixing our streets, fixing our water lines. Be with those that are behind the wheel as they approach our folks on the street. Help them to focus on the road, not on phones, not on the screens in their car, not on other things that could potentially cost a life. Help those tonight who are making presentations, help them keep their presentations to 12 slides or less, preferably 9. And Lord, we just wish your blessings upon us and allow us to do great things tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
like that. Okay. Thank you for that invocation, Deputy Mayor. We'll see if we can stick to that 12 slides. I like that. 6. We'll go with the first item on the agenda. If the clerk will read the roll call, please.
Mayor Padilla.
Here.
Councilmembers Hiller.
Here.
Valdivia Acala.
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Emerson.
Here.
Kale.
Here.
Nager.
Here.
Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Hofer.
Here.
We have 10 present.
Okay. Move on to agenda item number 2, presentations. If you will read, Brenda.
We have the Shawnee County Nurse Navigation Program. Johnny Intern's here to present.
Mr. City Manager? Or do you have anything? Okay.
Well, the good news is I don't have a presentation, so no slides is a good slides, right? So, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members, thanks for allowing us to be here today. Are we working? Test.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, awesome. To talk about nurse navigation, I know it's probably about 6 or 8 months ago I came forward and gave a presentation to the board of we were looking at implementing this within Shawnee County within the 911 system. We tried to get in front of you prior to the go-live day of April 25th to fill you in. However, we were just not able to make that work with some conflicting schedules. So I'm here today just kind of talk about an overview of the program. I believe all of you should have in your packets some marketing materials that were developed by our team as well as the county as well as the city PIO department as well that might answer any questions that you may have moving forward. Couple quick introductions. With me today, I've got Mickey Huber. He's our operations manager for day-to-day operations here in Shawnee County. And then Nelson Castile is our ambulance compliance officer from Shawnee County. He's the one that keeps us in check with our contract with the county. So he's the principal. So really, nurse navigation is getting the patient to the right location at the right time by the right mode of transportation. We quickly identified in this system, as well as many EMS systems across the world, a large misuse of the system for non-emergency, low acuity calls. And that's really what this system is aimed at fixing. To take these stub toes, sore throats, toothaches, leg pains, those kind of things out of the 911 system, tying up a valuable resource, either a first responder partner or an ambulance, and allow us to get them to a different location so that we have the ability to get them the appropriate level of care. So today when you call 911, what happens? The 911 dispatchers of Shawnee County will answer the call. They'll ask you if you need police, fire, or medical. If you say you need medical, they immediately transfer it to our dispatchers that are sitting inside of the Shawnee County Emergency Communications Center. Our dispatchers then immediately run them through what's called the Emergency Medical Dispatch Protocol. That protocol is through the National Academy of Dispatchers. It's scientifically and validated to triage that level of care needed. So is it a non-emergency BLS call, or is it an emergent advanced life support call where they need help right away? By working with members of this community through this implementation process, we identified several low acuity type calls that we're able to roll to the nurse navigation team. Those nurses are certified nurses that are licensed within the state of Kansas. They are not housed within Shawnee County or within the state of Kansas. They're sitting in one of our nurse stations in Texas. And those nurses then do a triage of that patient. A couple options that they have available to them. They can do nurse advice at home. Sir, ma'am, sounds like you maybe have a cold or the flu, so let's take some ibuprofen, Tylenol, drink plenty of water, and we'll call you back in 24 hours and check on you. The other option they can do is connect them directly to a telehealth provider inside of their home, so they don't even have to go anywhere to visit with a physician. The third option is to allow transport to an alternative destination. Our current alternative destination partners within the city of Topeka are GraceMed. We're in the process of onboarding them right now. They were a little late to the game, but we'll have them on board very, very soon. All of the Cotton O'Neill clinics for their urgent care systems, as well as University of Kansas St. Francis Urgent Care Center. So we have a lot of different places we can send them, but probably the biggest also to help us out significantly is Vallejo. So really the hopes is some of these mental health crises, rather than picking them up in an ambulance and hauling them to the emergency room where they're not going to get the services that they need initially, we'll be able to divert them directly to places like their crisis city. So I guess that's pretty much the program as it stands. We did go live on April 25th. As of today, we've had a total of 23 calls that we've been able to roll to the nurse. 6 of those have resulted in being pulled out of the system. 3 of them have gone to alternative destinations, and 3 of them have resulted in nurse advice at home. We anticipate these numbers are going to increase significantly. So our dispatchers are learning the flow, learning what's appropriate to send with the nurses, as well as the nurses are learning what's appropriate to send to the alternative destinations. Our initial numbers when we were putting it together, we estimate approximately 4,800 calls will come out of the system and roll to nurse navigation in a year period. So I'll stand for any questions that any of you might have.
Councilman Kell.
Now, on that scenario where you send it over to be triaged, is there a scenario where they can kick it back if need be?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So depending on the severity of the call, they may kick it back immediate for an ALS emergent response. And if that is the case, then we're going to respond. The fire department's going to respond in that emergency type situation. The other option is the nurses have the ability to triage, and that triage has a time limit of when care is appropriate. So it might be needs to be seen within 2 hours. So we'll inform that patient that within a certain amount of time, we'll have an ambulance there to pick them up to get them to the emergency room. Now, at any time, the patient or the caller can say, I don't want to do this and I want to be taken to the emergency room, and then we'll just cancel it and we're going to send an ambulance like we do today.
And then you mentioned your partners in the hospitals. Have you started working with the VA at all? I'm thinking on the mental health side of things, those veterans have already had that track record, let's say, have their records already at the VA, and maybe to send them somewhere else may not be as helpful as.
No, I think that's a great idea. I don't think that was anything that came up with the boards that were put together to put this together, but I think it's something that we definitely can pursue and see if there's an interest in utilizing their services.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Emerson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for your presentation. You mentioned that you think 4,800 calls a year might go to this? Out of how many calls do you get?
What was your yearly call volume?
Well, last year, sir, we had about 24,000 calls for service. We transported 17,000 of those.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia Acala.
Thank you, Mayor. More a comment than anything else. I remember first hearing about this when we had the Fire Commission, which was a couple of years ago, maybe in 2020, maybe in 2021. And I can remember, just saying how it felt and it seemed like a really good idea. So it's good to know that it's come to fruition. And I hope that, that we all find a lot of success from it. Thank you, Mayor.
Further questions? Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you. So with what you described, you did not mention having a fire engine come out. So with that, the idea is to provide that immediate service, and if they need transportation, to go straight to the ambulance level? Is that?
Yeah, so there's a couple different transportation options. So if it does result in transport, and I'm sorry that I didn't discuss this, to an alternative destination, if they do not have the ability to get to that alternative destination, we have a nationwide partnership with Lyft. So if capable, then they will send Lyft to pick up that patient, drop them off, as well as pick them up, take them to a pharmacy if needed, and then take them home. There is a scenario that if it's kicked back for an ALS emergent response, then yes, we would respond, the fire department would respond. If it's kicked back for a scheduled BLS, it would simply be AMR.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I can't see the monitors. Anybody behind me got their hand raised?
We can't see them either.
Okay.
There you
Just
go.
want to make sure, okay. Just want to make sure any questions come to you. Who's that?
I think she knows.
Okay, good. All
Okay.
right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation, sir. I appreciate it.
you.
I think it'll be a welcome service to our community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move on now to agenda item number 3, the consent agenda, if you'll read, Brenda.
A is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Christina Valdivia Acala approving a special event known as the Call Valley Bank Noto Party. B is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Christina Valdivia Acala granting Call Valley Bank an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning noise prohibitions. C is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Christina Valdivia Acala approving a special event known as the Sacred Heart St. Joseph Parish German Fest 2023. And D is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Christina Valdivia Acala granting Sacred Heart St. Joseph Parish an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at C concerning those prohibitions. E is an approval of a professional engineering design contract amendment between the City of Topeka and SBB Engineering LLC in the amount of $56,570 for the purpose of providing engineering design services on intersection improvements at North Kansas Avenue and Gordon Street, Project 601121, Phase 1. F is approval of a professional engineering contract between the City of Topeka and Wolpart Incorporated to the amount of $56,145 for the purpose of providing technical consultant services for the city's Geographic Information System, GIS, for the Public Works Technical Support Group. G is approval of a letter of understanding between the City of Topeka and ASPE Development Services Division. H is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Stephen Wade allowing and approving city expenditures for the period of February 25 to March 31, 2023, and enumerating said expenditures therein. I are minutes of the regular meeting of April 18, 2023, and there are no applications.
Okay, we've heard the consent agenda read. The chair will entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Move to approve by Deputy Mayor Dobler, second by Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala. You'll call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
and Dobler.
Yes.
We have 10 yes, motion carries.
Okay, motion's been carried. Move to action items, agenda item number 4, if the clerk will read.
A is a resolution introduced by City Manager Stephen Wade, setting the public hearing to consider the advisability of establishing a Community Improvement District, CID, at the corner of Southwest 32nd Terrace and Southwest Topeka Boulevard pursuant to KSA 126A26 at SEEK.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item and the next one our request to set a public hearing for June the 6th. We have had our first request for a TIF project come in. Our policies dictate that by timeline, we have to set the public hearing. Details will follow for this, so the governing body can look at it in advance, but this just sets the public hearing.
Have any questions for the city manager? Councilman Duncan?
So just to clarify, this is in the TIF district we already established, right? I know we used blue along the red, so I thought so, but I wanted to make sure because the line.
This is in the South Topeka TIF district.
Okay. So I'm voting no on the first one of these, and I will explain why. I have been incredibly consistent on one area, and that is I'm willing to work with you on tax incentives, but I'm not willing to give you everything. And you've got to make some choices. Do you want more sales tax collection? Do you want less property tax? But when you do all of these things combined, it really becomes costly for taxpayers in the end. And we want development. We need development. I will work consistently with developers to get them there and do that. But my concern is we've got the TIF, take advantage of it. I still don't like a 2% CID. I didn't like it when we moved the needle from 1% to 2% when it was requested when I got on this council with another project. And I said at the time, my concern was this won't be the outlier. It's going to become 2, and then someday we're going to ask for 3. And so I'm just one of the, when people wonder why I vote no on even holding the hearing, it's because I have concerns with CIDs in general. It is a sales tax increase on citizens, particularly in this area, where a lot of the citizens who live on part of that don't need an additional sales tax increase. So I just wanted to explain why when I vote no, I'm voting no to stay consistent. Thank you.
Further questions for the city manager? Okay, you've heard the item read. The chair will entertain a motion.
Mayor, move approval.
Thank you. Motion to approve by Councilman Emerson. Is there a second? Second by Deputy Mayor Dobler. You'll call the roll, please.
Council members Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
No.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
No.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
and Duncan.
No.
Okay, we have 7 yes with Valdivia Akala, Kale, and Duncan voting no. The motion carries.
Okay. Motion's been carried. We'll move on to agenda item 4B, if you'll read.
B is a resolution introduced by City Manager Stephen Wade setting the public hearing for consideration of the adoption of the South Topeka Tax Increment Financing District Project Plan 911 Walnut Inc. at the corner of Southwest 32nd Terrace and Southwest Topeka Boulevard in the South Topeka Redevelopment District.
Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, this is the same project proposal, just this is for the TIF district.
As explained by the city manager, do you have any further questions? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion.
So move.
Motion to approve by Councilman Duncan, second by Councilman Kell. If you will call the roll, please.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
No.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Hofer.
Yes.
We have 9 yes, Valdivia Akala voting no. The motion carries.
Okay. Motion is carried. We'll move to action item 4C. If the clerk will read.
C is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Stephen Wade, amending the district map referred to in to refer to and amend a part of the zoning ordinances by the section 1850-050 of the Topeka Municipal Code on property located east of now Northwest Rochester Road, approximately 300 feet south of Walnut Lane, from R1 Single Family Dwelling District to PUD Planned Unit Development with M2 Multiple Family Dwelling District uses to allow for multifamily residential duplexes and fourplexes on approximately 7.2 acres.
Can't hear you back here.
Okay. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, this is a housing development on Northwest Rochester Road. It comes to you with a recommendation of both the Planning Commission and staff.
Okay. This is a matter that will require an ex parte communication request from the governing body before we move into a vote. But before voting, are there any questions for the city manager on this item? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Was there a protest petition filed?
Yes, ma'am.
There was?
Yes, there was a protest petition, and that's why we're going to, I'm going to be required to read the ex parte, and then we'll move into the voting options.
Well, was that in our packet? Am I required to, can I ask why they're protesting it?
Mr. Warner?
Councilwoman Ortiz, the protest petition is a standard part of zoning applications.
Right.
I guess generally they're not in favor of the project is the reason for the protest petition.
So is that the only reason? It's not like there's a safety or anything like that?
City Attorney?
Councilwoman Ortiz, the entire protest petition, as well as all the public comments at the hearing, are in your packet. So they do detail the public comments that were given at the Planning Commission.
Okay.
But yes, all of those, including all the signatures, are in your packet.
Thanks for that shot.
Okay. Again, before we proceed to voting on this, yes, Councilwoman Hofer.
Mr. Warner, after looking at it, there was something that was brought up and I didn't see any reference to it. Did anyone ever entertain the idea of putting a turn-in, turn-out lane as part of the development to alleviate some of the traffic congestion possible?
No, that was not a recommendation from our traffic folks. Essentially, a traffic impact study was not required, so there were no extra traffic items added or requested or required as part of this rezoning.
Okay, now I know because it was zoning, it wasn't required. Does it have to have a plat?
The property will need to be platted before they can go forward with building.
Okay, as part of the plat, will it be required to have elevations or more specifics on what the buildings are going to look like to go in to see whether they mesh with the neighborhood? I was driving up in North Topeka at lunch hour, and I noticed something over at Kansas and Menninger Road. There's a new housing area going in, and they're big, chunky, blocky buildings, which really wouldn't fit in this area. So I want to have something that kind of gives me an idea of what they're going to put in. About the only thing I could find was the height and sizes, square footage of the buildings. So if this does go through, I want the neighbors to have some kind of feel what would come or be built.
Sure. So within the zoning application, attached to the application are some building plans and some elevations as concept design plans, and then the PUD notes three things that should at the very least be
basically that the buildings that are built should be in substantial conformance with those design plans, and then 3 other things about gabled roofs and modulated building facades and so forth. So it's the PUD that really controls the design to some extent.
And why was the height of the buildings increased?
So the existing zoning is single family, which is R1. That height limit in R1, the maximum height is 42 feet. The rezoning, the base district for this PUD is M2, and that M2 maximum height is 50 feet. So it's a function of the base zoning district. That's part of this application.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Warner, you have a series of responses, I guess, to the golden rules, correct?
Correct.
Mike check.
Thank you. One of them is in regard to why the area hasn't been developed as R1 as it's currently zoned. Can you talk a little bit more to that? I mean, if they were building single-family residences, there would be no zoning case before us. Is that correct?
That is correct. They would need a subdivision plat, which
Right.
Yeah.
So what prohibits them from single-family?
I don't think we say in that standard that the R1 is prohibited there. It says the property is well suited for the uses to which it is restricted under the R1, but potentially the shape of the parcel and the limited existing access provide limitations. So it's that long rectangular shape and the fact that you probably only are getting one access to Rochester. So those are, it's not saying that the R1 isn't suitable. It's saying there's some challenges with the property.
And why could they not extend, I believe it's called Sproten Lane, down through the property and basically mimic what's platted above that parcel?
As a single-family development?
Yeah.
That is quite possible. They could do that.
Because they actually control all of the property that would be required for right-of-way dedication, correct? That's not owned by the city? Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Vadilla.
A general question. Are we going to do ex parte and then we will talk about the vote and whether we are for or against and then do the reasonings? Or I'm wanting to see understand where we're at right now with it's just basic questions, not
Just
commentary, correct?
Basic questions right now, not commentary. Before we move into a vote, I will ask for the ex parte communications and give the different options for voting, and then any council person can then make a motion to any of those options.
Got it. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Generally, there's a presentation. I want to draw out a little bit from you and then ask you to affirm some of the things that I read. If I understand correctly, this was set up so that there could be 40 single-family homes, and the proposal in front of us is to do 30 units total that would be duplexes.
So I don't know about the 40 single-family. The proposal in front of you is to do duplex and quads at a total of 30 units.
I thought I read that the capacity of how it was set up before would have been up to 40 single-family homes.
So there was a previous zoning case for the property that was not single-family. It was again a multi-family, and that had up to 48 units.
48, okay. So it seems like some of the things that have been at issue have to do with a concern about the floodplain or flooding, as well as a concern about the volume of traffic currently on Rochester. So could you speak to that? You mentioned a little bit that you opted that you didn't even need to do a traffic study on this one. So is there a sense on the part of the staff that there is plenty of capacity for this volume?
So I will make two general kind of comments about why a traffic study wasn't required. First of all, the anticipated daily volume of traffic from this development to and from, as at a level that's not close to requiring a traffic study. There's a certain level of trips that requires a traffic study. And then further, the volume on Rochester, the percentage of trips, again, going to and from this is a small percentage of what the total volume on Rochester is. So neither one of those things met the criteria for a traffic study. The issue with the flooding came up kind of early on. The property is near to the Soldier Creek levee, so that property is levee protected. It's not in the floodplain in that particular area.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councilman Kell.
One concern I've kept on reading about was emergency services and having, as it sits now, they are able to park on both sides of the street, so emergency services have had a hard time getting through. Will this property be required to have an adequate number of parking spots on their own property to keep from overloading the streets even more? And then have we had issues, has that been looked into, the issues of the emergency services be able to get to places more adequately? Because in this case, I'd almost say maybe a traffic study needs to be done just for the simple fact to see that we're not overloading an area that's already seems like it's overloaded.
So the first question, we require the necessary parking for each unit to be off the street, so on the property. So they are required parking to be off the street. And I'm not aware, we haven't dealt with the emergency services issue through planning submittals that I've been aware of. So I'm not sure we've addressed that issue previously with the fact that cars are parked on both sides of the street and emergency services aren't getting through. I mean, that's probably a situation that exists in a lot of neighborhoods in Topeka, central Topeka and elsewhere.
I get that aspect, but it's like almost, this looks like maybe a good time to look at something like that and say, okay, can we alleviate that problem of having that double-sided parking that creates a possible hazard, because I live on a street that has double-sided parking, and I know that it almost causes accidents when people trying to going both ways. So in this situation, if we're already going to kind of dive into something, I think maybe we should dive all the way in to see that we're maybe trying to alleviate a problem that's already existing.
I think the only thing I would add to that is I'm not sure that's a criteria of a traffic study. It's one of the things they look at necessarily. I'm not positive about that.
City Manager.
Councilman, we can look at your request and on a broader scope, but
Thank you.
Councilman Duncan.
So, since I got on this council, this is by far the largest protest petition I've seen on one of these. So, for whatever that's worth. So that got my attention, obviously, in and of itself. I made sure I read through everything. As with a lot of these things, some of the concerns I understand, but sometimes they just come with growth, so you kind of have to work through those. I thought that the flooding concerns were valid. I do think staff and others have done a pretty good job of going back and looking at the various areas and the levees, and I appreciate that. But I guess what has now become the common theme, which is what I think is the more valid concern, is some concerns with long-term traffic. And I drove out there to look at it. Hadn't really been to that little corner of Rochester for a while. It is a tiny little road in the grand scheme of things as you put more individuals and people out there. And I'm not saying it has to become some 4-lane super road. But I know sometimes when we do these projects, knowing some of that more information not just lets us as a city figure out if we've got to do some additional work on those roads, but also loops in the developer that we need to offer some assistance as part of that project and gives them a full picture. I guess I would have been, and I understand why we didn't do it, the policy, I totally understand that part of the process. I guess some of these questions that are in here with the protest petition, some of the council members have asked today, I guess I'm one of those who would also feel better if we went back and took just a look at it either with a traffic study or an emergency services analysis of what that meant, so that we could feel comfortable knowing that the road could actually handle any of the new development out there. And hopefully some of these other areas become developed as we grow, and we're going to want to do that work anyway, and it'll give us a long-term approach. So I guess looking forward tonight, if we're going to send this back, we have to do it with some direction of the Planning Commission, and I guess that would be I don't know how specifically we say that, but with a recommendation to consider a traffic study before sending it back. I'm sure there's a much nicer, polite way to say that, or more organized way to say that. But I guess if that's where we're headed, I would like us to see head in that direction as opposed to just outright approval. So thank you, Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. Question for the city attorney. Under the golden factors, character of the neighborhood is one of those, correct?
Yes.
And I know you can't really offer an opinion here, but if I'm looking at this correctly, the area of the subdivision or portion of the subdivision directly north could actually almost be mirrored and do the same thing, assuming you brought a road through, which we talked about a few minutes ago, which could be done. And it looks to me like you'd end up with 14 or 15 homes in there, single-family homes, if you mimicked what's north of there. That would fit the character of the neighborhood, would it not?
If it looks and feels like a neighborhood that looks and feels like what you're staring at, then I would guess yes.
Okay. This proposal would double that number of residences, albeit duplexes, but still double the number of homes and cars and other things. And I'm not going to ask you if that matches the character of the neighborhood. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Valdivia Acala.
Thank you, Mayor. So I still have comments to make about this. I'm just trying to stay within the parameters of where we're at in the conversation. But I do have a question for you, Mr. Warner. When we're looking at the golden criteria based on the Overland Park decision, so we have 8 that we should be considering when we look at whether we approve a zoning change or not. In the packet of information and emails that have come to us, all of this, am I missing something, or can I request something if we have not received it that shows how you all have met these benchmarks? Or is it just based on us voting on it as a governing body? We look at these 8 criteria, or is it something that you, Mr. Warner, in your capacity, have to make sure that you have checkmarked these boxes, in your opinion, as a representative of the city?
Councilwoman, we in the staff report put together our thoughts or our evaluation of each of those golden factors. So within the staff report is the evaluation of the golden factors. Those 8 things.
Okay, because I don't remember seeing those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I will go back and look though,
Okay.
but because to me, what we're talking about, and again, more in the commentary, is that there are a number of things in my way of looking at this and driving that area so many times and looking at the side roads, looking at Rochester Road, Menninger Road, looking at the backyard of where all of this is going to be taking place. There are, in my way of thinking, a number of criteria that are not met. So that's all. Thank you.
Councilman Kell.
Just one more follow-up I forgot to ask. There was concerns about sewer and septic on the existing homeowners. If they were have to switch from a septic to a sewer, who does that fall on? And is there any properties that you're aware of right now that would be impacted that way?
So the developer does have to extend sewer from the east to serve this property, to serve this development. It's not going to be in a location that is adjacent to these owners that are to the north that are on septic. It's going to go through the middle of this property, and really the utility standards are, that sewer line's basically right there, and that's not going to be the case. It's not going to be adjacent to those properties, so there isn't going to be a requirement for those properties that are not involved in this to connect to sewer.
All right, thank you.
Councilwoman Hofer.
I have a few more questions. Let's start with first on Rochester Road. And this might be a question for Mr. Copley. Is it anywhere in the vision of the CIP to widen it to maybe a 3-lane or just to make it more passable since it's grown? I know from Dillon's south it is, but it would be from basically the end of Dillon's property to Menninger Road would be in the city.
Currently, there is nothing in the CIP for the improvement or expansion of that section of Rochester Road from 2-lane to a 3-lane.
Okay. Next question is, Dan, on the PUD, and I hate these when they're this small, they play tricks on my eyes, I don't read them well. I know that it is stated that it is to be senior housing. How tied are we to that?
We cannot require that.
Cannot require it. Okay. Next question. Since I know it's not in the floodplain, is there anything for requiring them to raise the elevation for the pads for the home, for drainage and safety of those people moving in if it does happen to flood again?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. I think if this gets approved and they submit a subdivision plat, they would be required to submit a stormwater drainage report that will have to comply with the city stormwater standards and be approved by the city in order to develop the property. I don't know, absent of floodplain, if there's anything requiring elevation of those structures because it's not in a floodplain.
Okay, because I know of some properties, I'm thinking north of the soccer fields, I looked at putting a building in there at one time when it was up for sale and I had to raise the ground for the building 12 feet. So I didn't know if that was anything that was connected to this site.
That sounds like floodplain regulations, and this property's not within the floodplain.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. We've asked some probing questions, but I'm thinking also, I'm very respectful of the staff's recommendation as well as the work that the Planning Commission did on this. What I'm thinking too, correct me if I'm wrong, is that our adopted long-range land use plan is to address missing middle, is to look at a little bit denser construction, 2-family and 4-family, for instance, like this one is, that's exactly a priority of what our housing study and our land use plan looks at. Also, when you have a single-family development in the newer developments, it is not at all uncommon to have some single-family homes and then a sector of row houses, or in this case, lower density than that with the duplexes and fourplexes. And so it's looked to me like, in fact, this proposal, and again, at lesser density than it was zoned for at the time, was absolutely in line with what our land use plan and growth plan had. Is that correct?
Councilwoman, you're correct. The city has a housing study that identified a need in the community for missing middle housing, and the missing middle is those 2 units up to 20 units that Topeka as a community just simply doesn't have enough of. So I think I've talked about at this meeting before on previous zoning cases that it's good to see these in different parts of the community, and we've been getting them in different zoning cases in different parts of the community for the missing middle. I will say with regards to sort of land use planning, the duplex, the medium density residential is oftentimes the transition from single family to something else, or they aren't necessarily not consistent with each other. They are oftentimes next to each other as transition elements.
Thank you. I thought so. I just wanted to make sure we brought that out as well. and also a priority in our land use plan of infill, taking advantage of those spaces that perhaps hadn't been developed. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Further questions? It's a good opportunity to make sure that you take this chance to ask any other questions you might have. Okay, seeing none. I will now read the ex parte communication admonition, and then we'll proceed with the voting, and I will give the voting options available to the governing body. Prior to proceeding with the vote, each member of the governing body who has engaged in ex parte communication with any individual either in favor of or against the matter being considered must state that that communication occurred and indicate that even in light of having engaged in the communication, they were able to fairly, objectively, and impartially consider the measure based only upon the evidence provided on the record. The record includes the staff report, commission minutes, the testimony provided at the March Planning Commission public hearing, or similar relevant information related to the matter. So I ask now, members of the governing body, are there any ex parte communications to reveal? Councilwoman Hiller?
I think we all got quite a series of letters and with accompanying photos and so on. I read mine, but we all got them. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia Acala?
Emails, letters, phone calls, and met with neighbors, and I believe I can make an impartial and will make an impartial vote on this.
Okay. Any other? Okay. Now,
Same.
oh, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. I have talked to proponents and opponents, and I've received some mail and emails, and I can make an impartial decision. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Deputy Mayor Dobler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Same, received emails, letters, other things, and I too can make an objective decision.
Same, Mayor.
Okay.
Yep.
I believe,
Ditto.
Same.
okay, and members of the governing body have all received those same communications. And unless there's someone who feels they can't make a fair and objective decision. Okay, just want to make sure. I also now want to provide the voting options available to the governing body. Number one, we can adopt the Planning Commission's recommendation to rezone the property. Two, we can amend the Planning Commission's recommendation to rezone. We can reject the Planning Commission's recommendation, which is denying zoning. Or four, remand to the Planning Commission with a statement of specifying the basis for the body's failure to approve or disapprove the recommendation. So if you wish, I can repeat those options that are available. So I've heard a number of concerns. So again, to adopt the Planning Commission's recommendation to rezone the property, a minimum of 8 votes is necessary to adopt. To amend the Planning Commission's recommendation to rezone, again, a minimum of 8 votes is necessary. Reject the Planning Commission's recommendation denying the zoning, a minimum of 7 votes is necessary. Or remand to the Planning Commission with a statement specifying the basis for the body's failure to approve or disapprove the recommendation. A minimum of 6 votes is necessary. The Planning Commission will consider the statement at its next meeting and will resubmit its original recommendation or submit a new or amended recommendation for a review of the governing body. So having read those, the chair will entertain a motion for any of those voting options. Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. I think first and foremost, what I want to say about it is, with the golden criteria, I see that there's any number of issues that are not in relation to what we should be looking for the best reason for changing zoning. We've all read them already. We know that there's issues with Rochester Road. There's been no promises of when any changes will be coming. Road enhancements on Menninger Road, on Rochester Road, on Sproaton or whatever, none of that is happening. And to me, what it is going to create, because traffic continues there is a lot of movement there, a lot of bike riding there by kids, is that it is going to create a mess. And we don't know how long it's going to take for any of this particular building of the structures. We could be looking years out. Perhaps he's going to do it incrementally, but I think about the congestion flow. I think about this as often in this area, it is a lot of elderly folks in there. It is hard sometimes to get out onto Rochester Road when you're coming in from some of those side streets because of flow of traffic. I personally feel a traffic study could have been done, but I know sometimes within the city, we are very much by the book, very much we are not going to go past this certain step, and there's not going to be this study done or this study. However, there are also other times when we go beyond that, and when we are trying to be above board, when we are trying to work with the neighborhood, you go and look past those hardline exceptions, and these type of studies are done because you're trying to work as much as you can with the neighborhood and to take into account the massive change that this zoning could end up placing on the community. The issue with the flooding, it bamboozles me that all around this area is floodplain, but in this particular area, and we know it's because they're saying Soldier Creek has the levee area, we understand that, but having viewed those pictures of water coming up to the neighbors' back doors and sliding glass doors, patios, etc., then we have no certainty that this won't happen again. So what will become of that? What will become of the housing project? What is going to become with this senior housing that the city will not even enforce it or cannot enforce under fair housing laws that it will be? There is nothing that also states in here that this would not, to me, this is going to drastically change the condition of the neighborhood, not only with the traffic flow, not only with the type of dwellings that are going in there, given what is already there. It is like you are looking at a big circle, a big piece of pie, and you're putting something in one tiny section, and that's what it's going to be like having these housing units basically placed in the backyards of the residents. Will this change the character of the neighborhood? Yes. Also, because these are going to be rental properties and we have mostly homeowners, established homeowners in this whole section. I understand that we want to go with the housing study and all of this, but to me, with the amount of land that is out in that area and everybody trying to do their due diligence with abiding by the housing study, I kind of think it's a little bit disingenuous to start using that right now in this particular context because of so many issues that we're dealing with here. The pedestrian issues, the no sidewalks, where is the traffic flow going to go with the construction equipment that comes in? How is that going to degrade the neighborhood? It is going to be a big change in the neighborhood. And I am no engineer, Mr. Warner, but to me, the changes that come with this are not appropriate. And I am recommending, as far as being a representative of the district, to deny the rezoning. Because I think that there are just too many things that are left unsaid about what can happen with road expansion, the what ifs with possible flooding. And I'm sure that there are other parcels of land that can be looked at besides this. So I am recommending, I'm not voting for this, and I am putting a motion, would I have to do a motion? A motion for number 3.
So, for the record, a motion to reject the planning commission's recommendation, correct? Is there a second?
As a point of clarification, that would be a motion to reject the planning commission's recommendation for the reasons previously stated by Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala, correct? We just need to establish a record that you're doing it based off those reasons.
Yes.
Okay.
Point of order, I guess, or question for council
Councilman
on that
Duncan.
motion. Once that motion is made, if seconded and voted on, up or down, are we done? Or can we then take another?
If you vote on that up or down and it passes, you're done. If it fails, then you keep going with whatever you would like to do next.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Dobler.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Second by Deputy Mayor Dobler. If you will call the roll, please.
Okay, Councilmembers Hiller,
No.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
No.
Emerson,
No.
Kale,
No.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
No.
Duncan, Hofer,
Yes.
and Mayor Padilla.
No.
All right, we have 6 no. The motion carries. It fails.
Fail.
You need 7.
That's right.
Reject.
So the motion fails. We need 7 to reject.
Councilman Kell.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, I'm trying to get my screen back up with the agenda. Okay, I moved to remand to the planning commission, and I believe what needs to be done is this traffic study, and also look at widening the road and adding access to, or adding sidewalks in so people could access the, down the road situation. So, I think it's mainly, for me, the biggest part of this is a safety concern. And, I believe that's what a lot of the, I think we had to have a reason on there to why we wanted to remand it. So I think the traffic study and also, looking at adding sidewalks would be my, motion to remand back to the planning commission.
Okay. A motion to remand, Councilman Emerson.
Mayor, I guess a question for our city attorney on that. Can we, how specific can we get on what, and I, by the way, I'm not opposed to remanding it with the traffic study. I'm with you there. I don't know that we can mandate then a lot of specific things, right? Because if the traffic study doesn't warrant it, we can't say that we don't care, we still want X. Is that correct?
I don't know that we would normally remand for such specificity of whether or not it needs a sidewalk at this time. A traffic study seems very appropriate to remand to see whether or not a traffic study is warranted. Sidewalks would come as you continue to plat and look at those things. So that would be the next step, the plat.
Thank you. So Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Councilman Emerson.
Councilman Kale, would you consider, I guess, an amendment to your motion to remand it and ask that they do a traffic study?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, in that case, I would second that.
Question.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on the floor to remand. If you would repeat the specificity.
Sure, I guess remand to the planning commission, ask that they perform a traffic study to see what the impact will be.
They wouldn't actually themselves plan the traffic study, so it would be a remand to have them consider whether or not a traffic study is needed before this moves forward.
That's exactly what I meant.
Madam City Attorney, having said that, that doesn't exclude all the other concerns that have been expressed here too, that the Planning Commission can take under consideration with the remand.
You could ask them to consider additional things. They're required to consider what you send back. You could ask them to reconsider whether or not it fits with the character of the neighborhood and whether or not a traffic study is needed. You could add additional factors if you would like them to reconsider it. They will reconsider what you ask them to reconsider.
I think Councilman Duncan and then Councilwoman Valdivia. Okay, Councilwoman Valdivia.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question. When we're talking about the traffic study, actually, I think this is a comment. A traffic study, and our traffic studies are usually done internally. Is that correct, by the city engineers? Who does it go through?
Phone a friend.
Thank you. In this case, the traffic study would be required to be paid for and performed by the developer, who would engage a traffic engineer to do that study.
Thank you. I have one comment to make. I don't even know, I'm just going to make it. You know, it's all come down from the Planning Commission, it's come down from staff, that this should be something that takes place. I'm giving you the reasons why I think it should not. Deep concerns about this. So to me, the traffic study, I would be very concerned that I think we just need to take extra care that whoever we're getting for this traffic study that y'all are talking about, I would have concerns that it wouldn't come out on the side of the city. Thank you.
Councilman Duncan.
City Attorney, a couple quick questions. Or I guess half of these I know and half of these I don't, but I want to make sure, right? So the process, it'll go back, they'll make their recommendation, and it will come back to us again for consideration based on either the same information or new information, correct?
It would not come back to you if they rejected it. So
If
then
rejected,
it could
okay.
die at the planning commission
Okay.
level. But if they reapproved it, then yes, it would come back to you.
Okay, so we'll have a second look at this if we remand it.
Correct.
My second question is, what happens to the status of the protest petition once we remand it back?
I believe the protest petition is just this time. So when it comes back, I do not believe the higher standard goes into effect unless you would like it to. You can require a higher voting option. I believe that's the discretion of the governing body. So if you want it to continue at the 8 votes to pass, but the protest petition is for this time.
Okay, so the next time they would just do another one. Okay, I just wanted everyone to understand that that's part of the process. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from the governing body? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Mr. Mayor, Madam Clerk, what was the last vote that we just took?
The motion was to reject the planning commission's recommendation for the reasons previously stated by Valdivia Acla, and that motion failed. And this one
What was the vote count?
it required 7 and there was only 6 affirmative votes.
Okay. So if I were to, being on the prevailing side, could I come back and ask for a revote?
Well, you currently have a motion on the floor, so you would have to get the current.
Is there a second with the motion on the floor?
Yes, it was seconded by Councilman Emerson. So a motion to reconsider would not take precedence over the motion on the floor.
It would if you let me. If you put your gun away, it would. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll see where this goes.
Okay.
Man, to be quiet.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Maybe this is sort of a technical question, but do we really, maybe one for city attorney, do we really, or Dan, do we as the body have the standing to require a traffic study versus send it back for reconsideration of the traffic? Do we have the right to require it?
The motion on the floor is to send it back for them to consider whether or not a traffic study is necessary. I do not believe you can send it back and say, do a traffic study. You can ask them to consider it.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Deputy Mayor Dobler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's a couple of other things that need to be looked at. I don't understand why we don't regardless of which way this goes, we don't require connection to Sproaton, so there's two ways in to the subdivision. I would think that emergency services would prefer it that way. I also think that I would like the Planning Commission to take a closer look at the character of the neighborhood issue. So I'm going to suggest a substitute motion that would remand this to the Planning Commission with three items to look at: character of the neighborhood, connection to Sproaton, and a review of the traffic. And that's my substitute motion.
So, City Attorney, will that require a second for his substitute?
Yes, it would require a second.
I second that.
Okay. We have a substitute motion on the floor with a second. We'll vote on that substitute motion. Councilwoman Ortiz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Attorney, did that cover everything that Councilwoman Christina Valdivia Acla wanted? Because that cut some of her stuff out, is that correct?
I would not want to speak for the councilwoman.
Well, she listed more than 3 things, I thought.
Councilwoman?
Thank you, Mayor. The issues that I specifically stated were the flooding concerns, no traffic study being done, the whole thing about there being so much land out there, land that I'm sure would be available for development that was not in such shaky area for possible flooding, even though it's not on the floodplain. And that it is basically going to change the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood, because of the way these 30 units are going to be plopped in a very concentrated area of land. Also, the traffic flow is going to be very difficult with construction vehicles, all of that laid out. It is going to make a mess in the area, and we don't know how long that may take. This may be incremental building. Those are all, I think those are the majority of concerns. And that there is nothing that states that the city can, because of fair housing laws, put this as a senior dwelling. So this could end up being rental properties that could get run down, not knowing who, is in them. Who knows with the developer. And then that neighborhood is definitely going to be transformed for the worse. So that was about it. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Dobler?
I guess in light of that discussion, I would amend my substitute motion with the concurrence of the second to add to those 3 items, relook at the drainage issues.
Second has amendment.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to make sure, Madam Clerk, if you will repeat what we're voting on so that we make sure that we get it right.
Okay, the substitute motion is to remand back to the Planning Commission to look at the character, the connection to Spartan, and review the traffic and look at the drainage issue.
Okay, thank you. And Councilwoman Hiller?
Thank you. Before we vote, I feel compelled to speak up about NIMBY, not in my backyard. We also saw in a lot of those comments, the change of character people commented, we like being able to look out and see this undeveloped property. We like that small town rural feel. We as a body, as a city, have talked about being developer friendly and of the need to I already mentioned earlier that the different kinds of housing complexes. District 7, actually, in southwest Topeka, I think, is our highest percentage of rental properties. We have 40% renters. Most of those people are very good people, and their properties are well kept, and the small neighborhoods are well kept. And so it's scary to me to have we just need to be careful. This is a property that's owned already by the developer that's proposing it. It's been undeveloped for years, and the Planning Commission worked hard to look at whether it was developable and what was appropriate. They did discuss that cut-through lane. The neighbors really don't want the cut-through lane, and you can do a keystone-type cul-de-sac without it. It's a greater security as well. So this is big to send it back, or certainly to reject that offer and that work. Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia Acala.
Thank you, Mayor. Seriously, NIMBY? No. To me, this is not a case of NIMBY. This is a case of concerted fears. This is a case that have been talked about already. And for a district that is having to deal with the multitude of unsheltered and encampments and fires, and those also impact your district. And I just think that that is the most ludicrous statement to be had, because people have that right to express what they believe and what I believe can change the character of a neighborhood. And excuse me, District 2 is LMI, so I don't think there's a lot of that going on. I mean, I think that that's really offensive. And yeah, thank you, Mayor.
We have a motion as amended and seconded on the floor. Madam Clerk, if you will repeat the motion, please.
Okay, it's a substitute motion to remand back to the Planning Commission to consider the character, connection to Spartan, and review of the traffic study and look at the drainage issue.
Okay, we've heard the motion. Now we'll call the roll for the vote.
Council members Valdivia Acala,
No.
Ortiz,
No.
Emerson,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
and Councilmember Hiller.
Yes.
All right, we have 8 yes with Councilmembers Ortiz and Emerson voting no. So the motion carries. What is it? Sorry, Valdivia Acala and Ortiz voted no. So we have 8 yes, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank the body for the discussion on this item. I think a lot of ideas and thoughts were expressed, and I think that's important for us to do as we move forward on these items. We'll move now to agenda item 5, the non-action items.
A is discussion concerning establishment of the Topeka Land Bank and administrative policy guidelines.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd actually like to defer this to Councilmember Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Manager. Gave a presentation a few weeks ago on the land bank proposal. As I said at that time, that program had been put together by lots of folks over a long period of time. But once it was out in the world, we wanted to hear feedback from both my colleagues here in the council and individuals out in the community once they could sort of have a full look at that plan. The plan is still to look at a vote on this, not next week, but in 2 weeks. And I've got a few changes we've made, and I didn't have them ready before because when staff and I could meet and I got them together. So I will give this tonight to the clerk for the minutes, and we'll get this posted for the next couple of weeks so people can see. However, for those who were hoping for a complete rewrite of the program, you will be greatly disappointed this evening, as these changes are somewhat minor in the overall grand scheme of things, but did address, I do think, some actually still very specific concerns that are important. The first is, even though our intent has always been, and we thought it was clear because sometimes you read a document 20 times and it all sounds good, we will be strengthening and clarifying the language that makes it very clear that properties will not be sold to or given to or deeded to any private group that was going to use them as rental properties. That is not what this is to become. This is to create homeowners or continue to develop our existing programs that assist those who are already operating or in need for the various programs we already have across the city. So we are not here to create properties for landlords. But we thought that was a little clear, but it may not have been, so we will clarify that language. We had some requests to sort of, as it related to the Board of Trustees, we still plan to keep it at 5 members. We will clarify that one of those designates is specifically a neighborhood delegate appointed by the council. In fact, I will be speaking, I think it's tomorrow night, to CAC to talk to them about that. They asked me to come speak. We will make sure that one of those Board of Trustees is a staff member appointed by the city manager, who's an expert with this to help look at those properties and guide people through the process. And as written for the pilot period only, we will make sure that one of those Board of Trustees is one of us so that we can report back, understand what's going on. So that three of those will be that makeup of 5, which is expressed to us by some here and some others. We will likely include a provision that gives the city manager some authority to step in and say, I don't think that fits the goals and priorities of this program. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm going to veto that. Sorry, folks. Sorry, board, move on. That way there is a buck stops here sort of thing, just in case that there's some concern that the good intentions of the 5 may have, gone a little wild. And we would like to add to the goals section a couple new goals that provide the Board of Trustees and the program direction. One is to continue to ensure that we're following Topeka's master planning and development guidelines and priorities. And the other is that to always make sure that if available, we've looked at our other programs or program funds that can or should be used to address an issue with the property before we make it part of the land bank program. So again, I will get this in the minutes and around to everybody. The goal was not to not bring it, but just kind of ran out of time, which is, we're still not voting for a couple weeks, so you'll have a couple weeks to review it. But we'll get those put into the record and get those publicly posted and out to you folks. And so that's kind of where we're at. My goal is, if you have other changes, I'm certainly willing to listen. But at this point, if possible, I'd like to have a final discussion next week, ride or die, and then get the thing up or down vote, and we'll go from there. So that's the plan at this point, Mayor. And that is all I have this evening.
Thank you very much. Move on to non-action item B. If the clerk will read.
Mr. Mayor, I did have a question about that.
Okay, just a second. Councilman Camp.
When you said that you're making strong language in there about non-rental properties,
Correct.
Is there anything about multifamily, like a duplex where they are sold in 2 different units in that case? Because I know when my wife and I were first looking for a home in Topeka, we had a limited budget, and that was one thing we did look at was duplexes because they were lower cost compared to a full-size home.
As it's currently structured, the program would not disqualify duplexes from being brought into the land bank. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Further questions? Okay, move on to non-action item B, if you'll read, Brenda.
B is discussion of the proposed 2024 to 2033 CIP and 2024 to 2026 CIB.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight, we actually start discussion on actual projects in the CIP, and I'd like to turn it over to our CFO, Freddie Malgene.
Thank you, City Manager, Mr. Mayor, council members. First of all, I would like to continue our conversation regarding the 2024 City of Topeka Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP. I appreciate your flexibility and your willingness to meet with the team to discuss all your questions, comments, and concerns. Just for your information, all the questions that you are asking us, the Finance Department, we're compiling it into a document which will be housed online in the City of Topeka CIP website. And the title is going to be 2024 CIP Supplement Documents. The first document has about 20 questions and answers. So please, if you want to take a look, or for the people at home listening to the video. If they have any questions, they can definitely take a look at the document. So with that in mind, slide please. Oh, I do? Okay. Which way? That one is? Okay. There we go. Okay, Lynette? All righty. So this is the new roadmap based on the comments that we received last time that we met. So today we're going to be talking about the CAB, which is projects that will occur in 2024, 2025, and 2026. We're going to be focused on the 4 new projects. Then we're going to be discussing projects related to utility. And if we have time, projects related to streets. And if we have time, we'll discuss projects related to utility. So with that in mind, this is the agenda for today, the 4 new projects, the CAB streets and utilities. So the first one for this one, I'm going to pass it to City Manager.
Thank you, Freddie. Governing body, this East Topeka Master Plan is an update to our current master plan, looking at the 4 target areas on your screen: 21st and Rice, 45th and Croco, 6th and K4, and 29th in California. When we look at the Panasonic plant that is 38 minutes away and under construction, we believe that this side of town is a ripe target for additional housing, potentially retail. And so this would commission a study to come back with a plan looking for best use of these 4 areas. And then Elevation Parkway, which is the second project we have discussed with this governing body. We discussed it back in November. This is basically starting at 37th and Gage, coming down around to approximately 37th and Fairlawn. The plan, which is over 20 years old, actually provides for an extension at some point in time on over to Wanamaker. This study, which is underway, that you guys have already commissioned, is looking again for best use, whether that be a combination of housing and retail or housing.
Braxton.
I think that's my cue. So one of the new projects that were added to the CIP involves the improvements to the intersection of Kansas and Gordon intersection. This intersection was identified for improvements as part of the downtown master plan. We have eliminated the program for the downtown master plan and will be bringing individual projects to you. Obviously, there has been concern voiced by the council in terms of programmatic approach. And so this is an example of where we hear you loud and clear. We've eliminated the program. We will bring individual projects that we believe merit consideration and we want your specific approval for. This one, the improvements are going to involve a raised table to help reduce speeds and promote safety and pedestrian safety, particularly in this. As any of you who've been to Noto on a First Friday know that there is a lot of pedestrian traffic on here. Next slide.
Wait, very quick question. For those of us who don't know certain things, is a raised speed table a fancy speed bump? I mean, I know it's not. I don't know how else to ask it. And I'm fine with it. I just trying to envision what a raised speed table is.
Thank you. My apologies. Think of it as a fancy, wide speed bump. Okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Councilman Cal.
Have we looked at what those have done in other cities? Because I know from personal experience in Providence, all it's done is turn it into a launching pad for vehicles. And it still has, and it's been 20 years that it's been that way. And they still, because they use it as a crosswalk for their state house from one side of the road to the offices over to the state house. And for 20 years, it's been a launching pad for vehicles.
Certainly, there have been improvements in terms of design. This one is only going to be 4 to 6 inches in height. We did have a robust discussion with the neighborhoods. There is a limo driver that does business along there, so we wanted to make sure that it was going to not bottom out his vehicle. So that's been taken into consideration in the design. There's a very successful one that was used in Manhattan that our consultant offered as an example so that when we had our public meeting in Noto, people were able to see one that is currently working effectively.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Certainly. The next new project is to improve the flow and the safety of South Topeka Boulevard, particularly for that left-hand turn movement onto Southwest 45th. Currently, we're getting a tremendous amount of stacking along there. So what we'd be doing as part of this would be geometric changes to the intersection to widen it and to eliminate that median to provide dual left turn lanes onto 45th from that southbound movement.
So at this point, this is when we open it to discussions for these 4 new projects.
Councilman Kell.
Kind of going back to the areas of improvement, the 21st and Rice, 45th and Croco. Have we been in talks with Shawnee Heights School District at all on any of these plans? Because from my understanding, they're at capacity right now with the school buildings that they have. So I think it would be good if we were, not trying to, not communicate with them and have, 300 new people move in with kids, and all of a sudden now they're forced to not have a plan ready to go for the schools in that situation.
So part of the best use study, we'll take that into consideration.
Okay. I'd rather make sure the schools are ready and they have a plan, so this way they can build a new building, hire new staff and all that, and be ready for anything we're trying to do as a city.
Councilwoman Hofer.
Okay, I have a couple questions on the different ones. I'll get back to that. East Topeka Master Plan, the turn lane traffic signal in Kansas and Gordon, those are one-time cost. The
Yes.
amount that's in for 24 will cover all of it as
Yes, ma'am.
inflation adjusted, whatever we have to worry about, but. Okay, then on Elevation Parkway. I see the blue lane for Elevation Parkway. Is the section of Fair Lawn that's shown attached to, is that a future possible extension, or I'm not quite sure why it's red in the plan.
It was just to highlight the potential different phases. So as a starting point, there are 4 different potential phases for the Elevation Parkway. Phase 1 would be 37th Engage to approximately 41st and Fairlawn. Phase 2 would be 41st and Fairlawn to 37th and Fairlawn. We are in the process of negotiating the RFP with the consultant to get this started. Laced throughout that RFP are a number of safeguards for the governing body, and that is we are setting it up based on tasks. And so as we get through a task, then the first task is to do a hard look at the land use study, look at potential growth, development, traffic counts, all of that. And then with the understanding that any one of the 4 the city council can say, I want to pull the trigger and do that one first. So it's very much left in terms of, as we complete a task, we report out to you, we see if we have your support to move on to the next one.
Okay, and I'm looking at the money that's listed for 25, 26, 27. 25 is substantially more. Does that include land acquisition cost, design, and starting the build?
So we came up with a WAG for the first 2 phases that would include construction, obtaining right-of-way, and basically we reduced that by a fraction, knowing that there will likely be required by the governing body to have some level of participation by the developer. One of the things that I'm looking for out of this study is to get refined costs, as well as to come up with some different options for you to consider in terms of, and we need to have the study to know whether a 2-lane collector is going to be sufficient, or do I need a 3-lane arterial, a 4-lane arterial? Do I want to have it set up as a parkway with a median for stormwater management in the middle of it? All of that, all will focus on the cost, and I want you guys to have good information to make good decisions. So we are still very early stages, ma'am.
So the 7 million is, part of that is the study.
Yeah, part of what's been approved would include the study.
So,
The study, is that in 23?
so the study was approved previously.
Right, okay, that's what I
yeah.
just
And
remembered.
it's cash funding, and so this would include design.
Okay, that's my questions. Thank you.
Councilman Kell?
Now, on the Elevation Parkway at 37th and Gage, is there anything right now that might interfere with that? Because I've noticed recently they've cleared a lot of that area of any trees and anything like that. So I just want to make sure that's not going to be interfered with by a developer right now trying to maybe either shut it off or whatever, just to try to cut it down.
Councilmember, we've actually been in discussion with several different developers about that, and there's not an issue.
Okay, thank you.
More questions? Councilman Hiller?
Just some clarification, and sorry, I am only looking at page 6 in our book, which is the summary of the new projects. It's not the project plan. So if I was flipping pages to pages, I might have the answers to these questions. But from what you just reviewed, the East Topeka, the 306,000 in 24 is simply a plan. That's no construction, that's no design, that's all just a plan?
That's right.
Correct.
Okay, and then the Kansas and Gordon, though, is all construction? Yes? No?
Correct. That would cover the construction costs for that.
Okay. Now, Elevation Parkway, which was discussed before with us, touched on the issue of maybe a developer covering that. There was some discussion that maybe the developer would cover all of it when we first talked about it. How strong is that still?
Until we get the results back on the best use study, we've not advanced any more discussions with developers.
Okay, so we're looking at 15.7 just for 2 phases. Might or might not be all on us, so we'll have to be following that as you report back on the developments.
That 15.7 assumes that it would not be all on the city. So that 15.7 is a reduction for what the total price would be if the city were to develop it all by itself.
Okay, so the 15.7 is a total, it's not a reduced, it's a number that's under what you think. What do you think the total is going to be?
It was approximately 22 million to do the water line extension, a little bit of sewer extension, plus the street improvements for phases 1 and 2. And so the 15.7 is basically a percentage of that, recognizing that we're looking at the consultant. Now, let me also say, one of the things that we are requiring of the consultant as part of the land use development is to come in with options in terms of what's best practices, what are the options that are available for what portion of it would be fair to be paid for by the developer, and what other options are there, for example, a traffic impact fee to be levied at the time of pulling a building permit. So all of those options are on the table, and we will be coming back to you with those.
This is perfect world, maybe the most that would be our part, but it is only, whatever it is, 75% of the total that you're expecting. Again, you described the different sizes, that's, okay. Now, this turn lane on Southwest Topeka 45th that you discussed, that is construction only?
Yes, ma'am, that is construction.
Thank you.
Other questions? Proceed.
All right. Well, then we'll proceed with the next street project. This is going to be roughly 13 new projects that Director Copeland will discuss. Is that the first one?
Thank you. The first one is the intersection of Topeka and 21st Street. We actually went into great detail of this 2 weeks ago at the city council meeting when we were brought in front of you the request to move up the Topeka Boulevard project 15th to 21st. The intersection of 21st is scheduled for construction in 2024. Obviously, we will alt bid it, but our strong preference is for a major arterial intersection of this nature to do it in concrete. It's going to give us the greatest longevity, even though concrete may be a little higher than asphalt. And I will stop after each one to see if you have questions so that you're not having to remember questions for 17 slides. Okay, seeing no questions, next. And one thing I just want to preface this by saying is that in the past, we could have done a better job of going through the CIP book and adjusting projects for inflation. Clearly, in the last couple of years, we've seen crazy inflation, 25% inflation. And so what I asked staff to do for this CIP was to look at every single project that we had in there and look at our construction costs as of today and to come up with a legitimate defensible construction cost. Right? So that's where you're seeing these numbers in terms of $1 million, what was $1 million carried in an old CIP to where we are now. Some of them, there were cases where we had carried along a project budget for years and years and years, and it never got adjusted for inflation. And so this time we are effectively catching that up. So just wanted to preface my conversation. So this particular project, you'll notice that after we have a significant rain event that we have to close 29th Street east of Adams because we have flooding in this section because of the capacity. And so we know that we've got a capacity issue. We're just starting in design on this particular project. We reasonably estimate to replace this reinforced concrete box that's through there to increase the capacity. That we're looking at $1.65 million for total project cost.
So just for clarification purposes, this entire section right now are projects that you have previously approved, and these are updating prices.
Southeast Quincy 8th to 10th, as you're aware that currently we have in construction Quincy from 6th to 8th. This is replacing a 100-year-old water line that has high break history, as well as removing an unwarranted traffic signal, adding some bump outs for pedestrian safety, some minor storm enhancements, and then doing a mill and overlay. As part of that, we will be striping for bike lanes along here. Quincy is a really good road because of the low traffic volume to carry bike traffic. What you see on this will be 8th to 10th. This will basically mirror in terms of the treatment on how we're handling exactly the same amenities that we're doing on 6th to 8th that we're going to be proposing to do on 8th to 10th, including the replacement of the 100-year-old water line with high break history. Topeka Boulevard, 21st to 29th. We spoke about this 2 weeks ago. This project is very much limited in scope with $1.8 million. It's basically going to allow me to do a mill and overlay with some limited full depth patching where needed and point repairs of curb and gutter. This is not sufficient funding to do full depth reconstruction.
Mr. Mayor?
Okay, Councilwoman Ortiz?
Yes, I want to go back to the last project. Sorry about that, Braxton. I was waving and you moved forward. On the Quincy project.
Yes, ma'am. Quincy, 8th to 10th. How can I
Yes,
help?
can you please tell that contractor to get her done? Thank you.
Oh, you're talking about 6th to 8th. Yes.
I just want to be able to come to work without going around the whole block. So if you could pass that word to that good contractor, I'd appreciate that.
Will do.
Fairlawn.
Fairlawn. Fairlawn, 22nd Park to 28th Street. So a couple of things notable about this project. The real driver on this project is that we have failing corrugated metal pipe underneath Fairlawn that we've had to do 2 emergency point repairs on. And so it truly is a ticking time bomb, right? That we want to get this project going. We're going to be doing there's currently 2 stormwater conduits on there. We're going to be coming in with a single stormwater conduit, which is going to be in that outside southbound lane, so that we'll have a single stormwater system, not have to maintain 2 stormwater systems. And then as we get the stormwater project done, then we'll come back in and be doing a mill and overlay on this street, as well as up at the very north end, just south of 21st Street, where the Dillons is. Currently, there is a left turn movement into that Dillons that could be improved, and so we're going to change the geometry of the street and basically provide for some stacking for a safer left turn movement going northbound into that Dillons parking lot. Yes, ma'am.
Are you doing any work to the bridge?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We're going to be doing the approach, and I believe that we're planning on doing replacing the deck. Polymer overlay on the deck.
Okay.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Is the polymer overlay like what we've done with the parking lot out here?
I think it's going to be more substantial than that. 2-inch? Mark will provide the details on the polymer overlay.
I wanted to, I think of what happened out here, which was sort of a skin coat maybe, but also the Kansas Avenue Bridge, which is breaking up right now. I wondered what the lifespan is of a polymer overlay.
Oh, we can get 10 years plus on that, on a polymer overlay.
Okay.
If you're talking about the original deck replacement on this one,
Yeah.
that skin coat came off real quick.
It
That was
did.
an application procedure there.
Okay, but on the Kansas Avenue 6th Street, East 6th Street Bridge, which is chunking up right now?
Yeah, no, it's not like that. We did it right over here across, just east of the Holiday Building here,
Uh-huh,
over the tracks. That we did that like a year and a half ago.
okay.
So the same type of procedure.
So the 10 years isn't very long, really, is it?
That's a little small stretch on that. It'll last a lot longer that on Fairlawn.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Braxton. Thank you.
Next project, Southeast 29th from Kansas to Adams. I think Councilmember Emerson may agree that this project is long overdue to get in and do a mill and overlay with some minor base patching and curb replacement.
Councilman Kell.
I know we're going slide by slide. I'm trying to look at some of these just to, kind of map it out. So I love how 21st to 49th is getting done on Topeka Boulevard. But it looks like we're going to be doing Burlingame to Topeka Boulevard on 29th, then skipping over to Kansas and the Kansas to Adams. So I'm just kind of curious why we're skipping that section, because I feel that's where we kind of get into it with our residents of, we'll do areas and then we kind of stop. A good example is we've done a great job from Gage on 37th all the way up to Walmart. And then that's kind of just stopped. And then that from Walmart east to Kansas is this horrendous road. And it seems like we're just every year moving section by section, which I prefer that plan also, just moving a little bit by, because when you shut off a whole section of road, it upsets a lot of residents. But it just seems like we're skipping over something that as almost should be added into this project, just so we're having one long stretch rather than skipping over and we're getting to those bad road situations again. Because I like I said, I love the idea of going all the way and doing Topeka Boulevard in sections all the way down. And what we did with Gage. Now, my only problem with Gage on these projects, do we look at water runoff because, not 37th, because when you go over by Firehouse 10, over by Walmart, that area turns into a floodplain every single time it rains. And that road is just a solid lake almost when you're driving down the road. And I've always meant to take photos of it, but I'm always by myself. But do we look at that in our planning? Because that seemed like it was a perfect project to do when we were doing that, redoing that road, but nothing got put in.
So as part of our design, we will look at how the stormwater is handled as part of that.
Is there a reason why we're skipping over that section on 29th?
And you're talking about the section between
Kansas and Topeka Boulevard?
I believe that is currently in design.
Kansas Topeka Boulevard was done back in 2015.
Yeah.
We did a rehab on that section in there.
I'm just trying to remember. I drive that area a bunch, just like I was talking about the 37th and 37th from pretty much Walmart on. Like I said, we did all that and then we kind of stopped that. So I just try to get some of the mindset on why we're going down certain stretches and we just stop or skip over. It just seems a little counterproductive of what we're trying to do as a city, trying to make sure that we're kind of showing progress rather than it to the people in the department. It may look like perfectly clear sense projects that you guys understand by like the adding the polymer on that adds 10 years on, things like that. But to the regular citizens, it looks confusing when we're doing that, or we go so far, we just stop, or we skip over a section.
Okay, and Councilmember, thank you. That's an excellent comment. We will absolutely take that into consideration as we're looking for developing our projects and putting forth projects for consideration by the governing body. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller?
Thank you, Mayor. Question on this Southeast 29th that you have up, and maybe it relates to the others. There's reference that you made and in the text about doing utilities, doing some storm water line replacement and storm sewer work. Is that included in the $4 million price, or is that extra?
No, ma'am, that is not included in the $4 million price. We've had identified a section of water line that needs to be replaced in this section between Kansas and Adams, as well as a stormwater project between this section of Kansas and Adams as well. But that will not be, we will use this opportunity of closing this, doing this work to go ahead and commence that construction. And I've been holding off on those other projects until we got this under construction because I didn't want to go in and rip it up and put a water line in, and then the next year rip it up and do the stormwater improvements, and then come in and do a mill and overlay with some full depth patching.
I think that's great. I just wanted to clarify for this one and the others that where it references utility work, that's not in this price tag. And
Right.
so correspondingly then, if all we're doing is a mill and overlay, it costs $4 million just to go from Kansas Avenue to Adams?
We know that there's going to be a significant amount of full depth patching as part of this project because that road, parts of that road base are just shot.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Michelle.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I was noticing, I'm assuming that when they do the bridge over Butcher Creek, it's gonna coordinate with this section of 29th Street?
Absolutely. It's 4 projects in one, because we're going to be doing the bridge work as well. And obviously, the bridge is going to require a complete closure.
So are we going to bid it as one project?
Thanks for watching
or
tonight's city council meeting.
have a bridge specialist contractor? Do you know yet?
I do not know, but that's something that we will look at in terms of, does it make sense to have just to do the bridge project, get that in, done, and as we're going through the review process by the railroad, to just have them looking at the bridge and not be getting distracted by a bunch of other things? Or does it make more sense for us to put all of them, everything into one, and that way I'm just pointing at one contractor and holding him responsible to make sure that all of his subs perform at the same time? That's generally my preference, but I want to have the flexibility to think through that and to talk through that with our design consultant.
Okay.
Keeping with our 29th Street theme, this would be the next section from Burlingame to Topeka Boulevard. Again, looking at mill and overlay, full depth base repair where necessary.
I think
No, Bless you.
Southwest, a couple of points I want to make about this project. Southwest, Wanamaker, Huntoon, I-470. This is probably the second most confusing intersection and highest number of traffic counts behind the 29th and Fairlawn area, which usually I can't successfully navigate without getting in the wrong lane. So this project, we know needs to be done because of the condition of the road, particularly on Huntoon, east-west going through there. But we recognize that working with KDOT, there may be some opportunities for improving the geometry of the intersection, the signalization of the intersections to make them work better. As part of 2 weeks ago, the discussion was to our request to you is going to be to allow us to go up to an $11 million GO cap from a $9 million GO cap for this 3-year CIB for a total of $33 million. Just being straight up honest with you, if I can't convince you to go ahead and increase that cap to $2 million, this project has to be pushed out of the CIB because I simply can't fund it, and I have to prioritize looking at my other projects. We can continue to function at this particular intersection. We will keep it maintained to keep it passable. But that's just the reality of it in terms of the hard decisions that I need to make in terms of prioritizing. And I'm just want you guys to know that's part of the ask, to be able to allow me to include this in the 3-year CIB for that increase in the GO cap from 9 to 11 million.
Deputy Mayor Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Copley, what's the current level of service on that intersection?
I do not know off the top of my head. I'm going to guess it's a D or lower, but I will get that and follow up with you. Next one is Huntoon. You'll remember the project from a few years ago where basically went up to Executive Drive. This project is JADO half-cent sales tax funded. This would be a transformative project. Basically, you go from Executive Drive, where we drop back down to the 2-lane rural profile, open ditch, would be taking it up to a 3-lane profile all the way to Urish with enclosed stormwater. We had a storm repair that we had to do in there, emergency repair. We were able at that time to get from that property owner the additional right-of-way for this project. So nothing short term, but this is one for 27 through 29 that we're looking at being able to make a huge difference in terms of this particular roadway. And then on the Topeka Boulevard series continuing, we've got this section starting in 2025 with design and 2026 for construction of Topeka Boulevard 29th to 38th. Again, at this funding level, we're talking about mill and overlay with localized curb and full depth patching and traffic signal replacement. South Kansas Avenue, 10th to 17th. This is another project that was included in the recommendations in the downtown study that would have been included in the program. This is another example of us hearing you loud and clear, getting rid of the programmatic approach, coming back to you with standalone projects. This is one that we absolutely support in terms of the improvements from 10th down to 17th Street and trying to do work out the timing on this, starting with design in 2025 to make sure that we're being mindful of the additional traffic that's going to be carried, Kansas and Topeka during 25 and 26, when we have the bridges closed, when we're in the midst of the Port Quincy Viaduct reconstruction. Southwest Huntoon Gauge to Harrison. Again, this is a countywide half-cent sales tax funded project. Initially, we had contemplated getting started with the public engagement in 2023. That was moved to 2024 because we wanted to get 12th Street completed, get people driving on that so that when we started engaging people in the conversation, they would know how that's functioning. What I've told everyone is that there are no preconceived notions as to what that road is going to look like. Public engagement is going to be next year, and we are completely open-minded in terms of what the community wants. And then Topeka Boulevard, 38th to 49th.
Mr. Mayor, before we go on, I do have one question about the Huntoon project.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Copley, in looking at the Huntoon project, would it differ from the 12th Street project because we are not looking at a water main underneath this thoroughfare, or is it going to be similar in kind of the depth and breadth, literally, of the 12th Street project?
I do not know off the top of my head the condition of the water line, so I can't speak to that. You know, it was really only the very western portion where we did replacement. That last section from Gage over to basically Oakley was to go back with PVC. Most of the eastern section, there were cutting in some valves in a 30-inch main that we didn't have good valve spacing on, as well as we were able to eliminate some of the old cast iron lines, and we did do some limited crossings.
Okay.
Really, the major part of it was major stormwater work in addition to the water line work, which was real time consuming part of that.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, now would be a good time for any questions in regards to this last set. If not, it might be a good time for a break. We have about 30 more minutes that we'd like to go on the CIP.
Yeah, we're coming up on 8 o'clock. Why don't we do that? We'll take that break. And we'll give us just 10 minutes because we do have some people up for public comment. I'd like to give them that chance as well. So we will recess for 10 minutes. Be back here at 10 after 8.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With these now, we are going to start the projects related to utility. And now we'll pass it to Director Davis.
Let's see, we're going to start with the North Topeka wastewater treatment plant nutrient removal project. Let me turn this back on here. So this project is increasing in cost due to inflation. This is currently in design build. We have taken a new approach to doing things. To speed this up, it is required by our state of Kansas. I should spell it out for you. The National Discharge Elimination System. I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to do two things at once here. Anyway, regardless. Here we go. All right, so we are implementing improvements to the North Topeka wastewater treatment plant to meet those regulatory requirements that have been called out in our newest NPDES permit. We are slated to have these improvements completed by December of 2023 as called out in our consent agreement with KDHE. And once those improvements are finished, we have until December of 2024 to ensure that we're meeting our new phosphorus limitations. So like Braxton, I'll pause a little bit if you guys have questions on these as we go through. Yes, Ms.
Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Davis, just to clarify, it's already under construction. This is just extra money needed because of inflation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now we're gonna, any other questions? Okay, we're gonna switch over to the water plant. West Plant Basin Rehab. So there's several projects at the water treatment plant. And for those of you that may not know, at the water treatment facility, there are actually 3 different plants. So it's built so that we can take a plant offline at a time if we need to do improvements such as this. So this West Plant Rehab is a project to upgrade the West Plant, of course. The West Plant was built in 1953. These improvements were called out in our master plan that was completed in 2018. So we are slated to do several projects per that plan because we have a lot of much needed deferred maintenance at the facility. So the typical rehab cycle for this particular project would normally be about 50 years for the metal structures, and we're pushing 70 in this particular plant. So we're seeing some wear and tear. This 2-year funding began last year, or this year, 2023, and we're looking to extend that into 2024. It includes new mixers, sweeps, drives, electrical upgrades, some new concrete structures, recoating of our lime facilities, and new filter meters as well. Okay, so again, at the water treatment plant, we have a chemical building that actually serves all 3 of those plants. We need to do some additional improvements there. This includes some structural repairs, some lighting, some electrical work that needs done. Again, these are called out in our master plan, and we're looking at adjusting this project due to inflation. So $1.2 million increase to $1.8 million is what we're asking. All right. Next is the Central Zone Improvements and Optimization Project. So although it looks, there's a water tower in this photo, it is not a water tower project. This is This is a call out for a zone improvement project. We have projects slated for our other pressure zones, and these projects allow us to do improvements in these zones to help address hydraulics. If we need additional fire flow, we can address water quality issues, provide additional domestic service needs as we are trying to replace water lines in these areas. So this particular project calls out and helps designate funds for the central zone. All right, next is the East Plant Basin Rehab. So you'll see a climb from 6.4 million to 8.6 million. Let me see. On our East Plant, again, this is part of our master plan improvements. This plant was built in the 1980s. We believe it was last coated in the early 2000s. It's past due for another coating. Traditionally, we would look to routinely do this as the plan is to go in and inspect, and we predict that we may uncover, as they're sandblasting, we may uncover some issues with some of the steel associated with this facility. So the dollars are truly to coat this structure, but we do have some funds to accommodate some additional steel replacement if the need arises. All right, West Intake Rehab, 5.1 million to 6.79 million. Again, we're looking to just simply address inflation. This project, this intake facility was built in 1956, and the switch gears inside of this facility are so old that we're having a very hard time finding replacement parts for it. So we really need to do some improvements to upgrade that gear, get new electrical equipment. It includes installing new grates on the intake structure, new concrete, some structural work. There's a crack underneath that water line as well that we want to address. We want to do some coating on the interior and replace some check valves on the 24-inch lines inside of the facility. So some pretty costly but very, very necessary improvements for our West Intake facility. Okay, switching gears, we have the Shunga Creek Flood Mitigation Project. This project is a cost share project with the Corps of Engineers. As you may recall, there's a 35% city, 65% federal match. We would only move forward with this project if that match comes to fruition, the federal funds become available. So we're calling that out and want to move that $1 million to 1.1 so that we can potentially do this project if the federal funds are available.
Question about that. This is not the first year we've heard that. If I mean, like level of realistic optimism. I mean, I know that's an impossible question, but it seems to be an ongoing. I mean, the problem is it is a need at some point that we continue to face as we have the stuff filling in those banks. But we also don't seem to be getting any of that money. So we just keep waiting every year, I guess. Is that where we're at on it, or?
I think so. I think there's a lot of discussion in and around this involving multiple parties. I think that many of you, I don't even know how many people have seen, there was just another meeting with the Department of Ag and the county's flood mapping.
Yeah, I said it on that. So yeah,
that's constant revisions and review to see what's needed and then what funding is available and what everybody wants to agree to. So.
Okay. So we just wait. All right.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I just was curious. Thanks.
Question on this one. This is the part of the the section that we're talking about is what actually goes by the Valley Park neighborhood, is that right? Yes, yes. And so how much of the flood risk that they have would be addressed by this particular project?
That's a great question that I would definitely want to study up on before I give you an answer. So let me get back to you with that.
Okay. Thank you. I knew that's kind of what brought that neighborhood together to get active as a neighborhood, was really to focus on that flooding. And it's been a while since I was tuned in, and at one point it was like only 25% of the goal, and then I just wasn't sure where we were with what this project was doing.
Yep, in our Shunga flood study, it does provide a 25-year level of protection for that area.
Okay.
But to what extent on a map we can provide that for you in greater detail? Yep, I would just give me a little time and I can get that for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sylvia, I'm forgetting the discussion, but the flooding that occurred in 2007 was basically from west of Wanamaker all the way through this area, and yet this is the only area that's addressed. And as I recall, it's because federal funding was not available for portions west of here. And I know this is putting you on the spot, and that's not fair, but Braxton's nodding his head, okay. We were going to do some additional study on further west. I mean,
right.
There's a lot of people that got flooded in 2007 that aren't being addressed here. I guess my question, maybe more of a rhetorical question, but I'd be interested to know what the future plans are for studies or mitigation through the rest of the area inside the city limits.
I think that's a great question. Let me come back to you guys with some additional information on that. Yep.
Thank you. To just follow up on Deputy Mayor Dobler, my recollection from those discussions a few years ago was that a lot of the water was coming from the west side. So yes, an answer that looks at that whole, I don't know how far out to go to find the squeeze points or whatever it is, but that would be great.
Yeah, I think if you ask some of the people around 29th and Arrowhead, they'll tell you a lot of that water stayed on the west side in their basements. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, East Intake Rehab. So previously I talked about the West Intake Facility. Now moving to the East Intake Facility. This is the second of our intake facilities at the water treatment plant. This one is a little bit newer, and the switch gears inside of it are newer. So it is not in quite a dire need as the West Intake, but we want to make sure that we are not waiting as long to do these improvements and putting ourselves in quite the predicament that we're in now on that West Intake Facility. So the cost for this project is looking to move from $3.9 million to $5.2 million. Again, we are looking at a similar approach to just upgrading the electrical components, and somewhere in here, this facility, yeah. I thought I had some additional details for you guys, but it's very similar to the West Intake. It's simply, we're trying to be a little bit more proactive here. So it's called out in 2026. So we're still a couple years away, but we want to make sure we're getting it on everybody's radar as a need down the road. Okay, West Filter Rehab. This project is looking to move from $3.8 million to $5.1 million. This is another project that was called out in our master plan. This is to rehab the media at our west filter part of our west treatment facility. The under drain system underneath here is still active. It's still functional right now. Part of this master plan that we completed in 2018 was to put together a proactive approach to our maintenance of these facilities. And so again, to some of the cry outs that we've heard during this latest round of rate increases and to what we heard back in 2019 is how did we get to this position in the first place? And we are actively looking to make sure that we're being responsible and we're trying to update things as quickly as we can, trying to get back on a more responsible path to improvements. So this project, again, is 2026 funding cycle. We want to go ahead and start addressing these things a little bit more timely manner. So we're not quite on track for the, we're not looking at the full replacement cycles, but we're not extending those out as far as we have in the past, if that makes sense.
So council wanted to reinforce here that each of these utility projects have already been previously approved. These were also part of the rate considerations. So this is not new money. This does not change rates that we've recently passed.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question overall in terms of project management here. I think, what you're talking about with some of these kind of breathtaking increases is very responsible in terms of the inflation that has occurred. We know that some of that has sort of bobbled as things have settled. So my question is what your management approach is to these projects. If it looks like they're going to come in under, you're not going to need to do some of those things that you put some money in there for just in case, or the pricing has settled back a little bit, is the approach to say, well, great, we've come in under budget, that's awesome, or we've got a little extra money, let's do this also?
No. So none of these projects account for any scope creep at all. It is purely inflation, and if we did come under budget, it would simply be making sure that we account for that, and then if we have future need down the road, we would have to come back and ask you to be spending those dollars elsewhere.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. Yeah. But nonetheless, I get it either way.
Sure.
I wanted to know. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Now, you mentioned on some of these scarcity of parts, are we looking or have a plan? Do we buy some of these parts almost in bulk to make sure we have them until a project can be done? And have we looked at any other avenues, like let's say 3D printing, as a way to make a valve, the knob on the valve to turn it? I know that could just be, it's not in the water pressure, so there are things, but have we looked at those options also to maybe mitigate some costs of the rising prices of scarce items?
I don't think we've looked into 3D printing quite yet, but we do, depending on the cost and how scarce is this particular item. So if it's fairly readily available, or if it's not quite so long of a lead item, we may not keep too many on the shelf. If we think that there might be a very long lead time and it's a very critical component and we can financially consider keeping one or two around, if we think there might be a near-term need, we'll go ahead and do that so that we don't end up needing a part that's 18 months out. We've certainly done that with a lot of our valves and hydrants. As we became really short-handed on those, we made sure we could order as many as we could, not over-ordering at all, but trying to say what are our upcoming projects need, what do those need? How can we meet the need for those upcoming projects, and then some replacement projects for normal operation and maintenance of our facilities and our system? So to your question, yes, we do, but within reason, because we don't want six-figure pumps just laying around collecting dust. Some of those things have seals, need some oil that you don't want just drying up, and then they're no good when it does come time to use it.
Well, thank you.
This is the first time I've seen this. It's a lot. And there's a lot that are going on at the same time. I'm sure you've thought about how it's going to function with this part off, this part on, and switching back and forth. Are we going to have any issues?
You mean with the plant? No. This is a routine. The plant has historically operated by shutting one plant down and operating with two, or two part plants down, and that's all dependent on the time of year, the historic need, et cetera. So we want to make sure that we can continue to provide the water that the city needs, and the use for that, again, that time of year, and how long these maintenance projects will last. But no, it's very routine that they will take a plant down and bring it back up for routine maintenance.
Okay.
Again, I might reiterate to the city manager's point, none of this is new money out of these most recent rate increases. I think that you guys some of you might recall Mr. Sample standing up in front of you with some really old PowerPoints, and then of course Braxton doing the same and explaining the condition of the treatment plant, the water treatment plant, and then some of the things at our wastewater treatment plant, and the great need that we have. So I think that it just goes to show what detail has been put into master planning and trying to get a plan of action, and then start planning some of these projects so that we can start systematically taking them off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nice job. Thank you. No questions specifically. Just a couple of comments as we move forward in this process. I'm just looking at the funding source overview at the front of our book here. Revenue bonds for the next 3-4 years, 5 years really, somewhere around $30 million a year in bonding that we will have to do to maintain these projects, which are all necessary. Geo bonding, 22+ million for each of those years. Councilwoman Hofer said it's overwhelming, and it is overwhelming as we look at these individual projects, millions and millions for each of them. The net effect, though, is we have to build in debt service into our annual budget, which is coming up after this. On the general fund side for these geo-bonded projects, we have to build in debt service the next time we look at rates, which will be 3 years from now. And I know we're having discussions, individual discussions. I guess what I'm really looking forward for as we move forward here is what is the effect of everything we're doing on our future budgets. The CIP is such a conundrum because we're approving things now that force us to raise the mill levy or raise utility rates 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And it's always difficult to understand that impact. So I don't know that I don't have a question, it's just a comment. We need to focus in as we do these approvals on what that does to our debt service, because that otherwise we're going to be in trouble down the road. So appreciate it.
So Deputy Mayor, I could, if I could respond. We've actually been tracking that and been actually very careful with that. We are currently on a downhill trend on the GO side. So we have been reducing our debt. And so Adam, jump in here and correct me otherwise, or Freddie, but we're confident that with these asks that we're in manageable territory on the debt service fund.
Very good. How about the revenue side, or revenue bond side? Enough said. Enough not said. I mean, the problem is our property valuation, sales tax are going up, so the general fund side doesn't look so bad on the revenue side, but utility rates aren't keeping up with that. The other thing, one more thing, if I could, at some point here, and I don't know where this fits into our process, I would like to see just a simple update of our countywide sales tax projects. So we've got a 15-year program that's maybe we're halfway through it now. The Expo Center was the big dog this time around, sucked $50 million out. Obviously, part of that goes to economic development. I would like to see where we are projected on the projects and whether we're keeping up, frankly.
We can have that for you before next meeting.
Okay, it doesn't have to be sometime in the next few weeks, but that'd be great. Thank you very much.
First, I just want to make clear or ask, we're done with discussion, right?
Yeah, we're done for this evening.
Okay. Before we adjourn, I just want to say something which I'm sure the city attorney will be able to clarify. For any of my colleagues that believe that they may have cast the wrong vote when it came specifically to me bringing forth the motion to reject the Planning Commission's recommendation denying rezoning where a minimum of 7 votes is necessary. If any of my colleagues that were on that prevailing side, which was to not vote for this, that if they believe that they made a mistake in their voting, you are, under my understanding, able to make a motion to reconsider if someone changes their mind. And I'm sure the city attorney can confirm that. But I wanted to say that before the meeting adjourned, Mayor.
It is within the same meeting, so you could unwind all of that if you would like to.
Can you? Oh, I'm sorry. Mic check. Mic check, Mike.
It's on. Do you have something you want to say or take action on, Councilman?
Well, yeah, I was gonna reconsider my vote, but since it's already voted on and sent over, I mean, they've already got the votes. There's no need of me doing that. So, that's why I tried to ask during that particular time. I also wanted to say to Sylvia Davis, I think you're doing a great job, and I appreciate your thoroughness and how you handle our questions. And I just wanted to say that to you. To any of the council members, I've been out there on tour, and it's quite different when you go visually see it with all the pump stations, because they do get confusing. And I just don't know how much longer we can continue to put them off, because it's been really concerning to me. But that's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to thank staff for the wonderful job that she continues to do. I think Mr. Henderson should advocate for her to get a raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Previously, I visited with Sylvia as well and gave her the compliments for her work that she's doing. I think she is done an excellent job in her position. And I also want to compliment Braxton as well. He provides a lot of good information, very accurate information, and he's very responsive to inquiries from the council. So I compliment the staff for these presentations. Councilman Duncan, did you have your hand up? Okay. Okay. Councilwoman Hiller.
Well, I just want to throw in complimenting Adam and Freddie as well. They've coordinated this well and presented well, and thank you as well.
Good job. Thank you. So unless I'm missing any cues behind me or on screen, okay. We'll move now to public comment. We have 3 persons signed up for public comment. I'll call them in the order that I received them through the office. Mr. Leo, is it Hafner or Hafner? Leo Hafner or Hafner? Leo Hafner? Okay. Mr. Don Sloyer? Okay. And Mr. William Brandlin. Is that you? Thank you, sir. If you'll step to the podium, you'll have 4 minutes for your comments, sir. The lights will give you indications. Green to start, yellow you got 1 minute left, and then red your 4 minutes are up.
Okay, thank you.
Start when you're ready.
Okay, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, I'm here to speak in opposition to PUD 2302. You all got a letter from me, or rather an email and from me, and I just wanted to make you aware that 100% of the residents are opposed to this. And they're opposed to this for the various reasons that we've talked about, even the NIMBY reasons. And I would speculate that if a development as devastating to your neighborhood would occur in your backyard, the NIMBY reasoning would go out the door. Because all of this is going to do is drive down our property values, ruin our neighborhood, and everything that's good about this proposal is good for the developer. There is zero good for the residents, nothing. And if anybody wants to dispute it, that would be the time right now to speak up.
We don't do that during this portion. Sir.
I understand, but I'm just asking you to consider it, okay? You talk about the drainage issues. I sometimes wonder if the members of the Planning Commission ever drive the property. To the west, to the east, and the south, they're all in a floodplain. This parcel of property is right in the middle of that. And if you stand on my back porch, you can see that west, east, and south, this parcel is way below the land level of the other 3. You look at 2005 and 2006, water came into the residents' homes. In 1995, the same thing happened. So if this isn't in a floodplain, it should be. You talk about the traffic problems. There's going to be 30 units here, 2 cars per unit, 60 new cars, 1 way in and 1 way out on Rochester. Average trips per day are 4 per car. That's nearly 250 trips in and out every day at peak times. People going to work, taking the kids to school, coming home from work. You can't widen Rochester. There's no land there to do it. If you go to the south, 1/4 mile, there's a bridge over Soldier Creek. You going to widen that? So the idea that the traffic study was not essential is ludicrous. Okay? The Planning Commission really needs to talk to the neighbors and get their input on things that are going to devastate their neighborhood.
You still have a minute, sir.
Yeah, okay. It's just going so fast. But it devastates the neighborhood. Why wouldn't the planning commission come out and talk to the neighbors? Because I can tell you, everything on this list are problems that the neighbors came up with. Okay, so I'd just like you to think about all of that and think about what if this was happening in your backyard. Okay, I know we need more housing, but this land is not meant for that. It's a developer that made a bum investment, and now he's trying to make it right by putting in crap in our backyard. That's all I have to say. I'd be happy to answer questions if you have them. All right, thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
4 seconds left.
There are no other persons signed up for public comment, so we'll move on now to announcements. Madam Clerk?
For the May 9th agenda, we have one professional services contract on the consent agenda, 2 special events, and 2 noise exception resolutions. Action items, we have an ordinance for rezoning for Washburn Avenue, Kansas LLC on property located at 1404 Southwest 17th Street. We have another ordinance from Topeka Independent Living Resource Center for rezoning for property located at 1921 Southeast Indiana Avenue. We have an ordinance concerning the floodplain management for the city. We have a resolution for the 2024 budget and grant priorities, and then a resolution for the City of Topeka Title VI policy. Our non-action items include the continued discussion on the land bank and the CIP.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One quick one tonight. This Thursday, May 4th, the city, in partnership with KDOT, is hosting an open house in this building in regards to the Quincy Viaduct. There'll be information shared about, and there will also be information shared in regards to the upcoming utility relocation. That open house is from 5 to 7.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Nothing, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few quick things. The first is, I guess it was last year at this time, we had some information, but we weren't 100% sure, but we sort of took the, if we build it, they will come eventually, spent $400,000 plus, and it's nice to see that the Menninger Tower finally has a plan and a developer and a future purpose, and so I think we weren't 100% sure. We knew if we built the infrastructure there, we were pretty confident that that would happen, and it's nice to see that that's moving forward and is a reality. So good job to everybody involved, not us, but the developers and the community who rallied to help keep that place alive so that could happen. So glad to see that finally happening. This Saturday from 9 to 10:30 a.m. I will be at Fairlawn Plaza. You can come and talk to me about whatever you would like in my regular spot sitting there in the kiosk inside the building. So feel free to come and talk to me. And the last thing was I was, I guess, honored today to do my worst Vanna White, I guess, if you were, and I stood on the stage and handed out the small business awards as they were presented. I didn't present them, I just got to hand them to people. I didn't get to talk, which was fine. So you can see me doing my back and forth, but that was a great event. I serve on the Small Business Council, which does a lot, obviously, to promote the small businesses in our community. Proud to serve on that role, but there were some businesses there today that I had no idea even existed. I didn't know that we were building wagons, literally old wagons right here in Topeka, and selling them. And some of that stuff I knew was here. I did not know the breadth of its worldwide distribution of some of those companies, not just regional. So it was glad to see we can continue to recognize the small businesses, and then also just a fascinating eye-opener to all the amazing things that you don't realize are actually happening in Topeka. So always a good reminder. So glad to be there and appreciated people putting up with me handing them their awards today. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hofer. Okay. Councilwoman Healer.
Lots of things going on. I can't even keep track of them all anymore. I guess that's a good thing, right? A big event this Friday is the dedication of the statue in Pocket Park on Kansas Avenue for Teresa Cuevas, the first female recognized on the avenue, and certainly recognition of the Mariachi Estrellas. And so that's from 6 to 8:30. It's near the plaza downtown this Friday evening. And appreciate mentioning the Menninger Tower. I think it's worth mentioning that Emily Cowan, a very young woman who created this organization called Abandoned Kansas, and took video and put things together and promoted that, the redevelopment of the Menninger Tower and many other structures all over, I think was a real key part in getting that Menninger Tower moved forward. And so we've all wanted to get young people involved and then recognize those accomplishments when they happen. And I'm really proud of Emily.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
I wanted to let folks know that there is a second round this week of food sales for the Fiesta Mexicana Queen candidates. Sales start from 11 a.m. in the morning to 7 p.m. Prices range about $3 or so for any number of wonderful items. So certainly encourage folks to get into Oakland and participate in helping in this very long-standing tradition. Also wanted to bring forth very troubling incident that happened in Oakland with one of our churches that had horrific, racist, hate-filled, and hate crime type graffiti put on a bus that one of these churches in Oakland had recently purchased. I'm sure many of you saw it on WIBW, and I reached out to the pastors that have been deeply impacted by this racist, Nazi-esque graffiti, and I am very thankful that the city manager, the chief, and all are being so proactive on it. This is the second time in less than 3.5 years where racist, Nazi-type graffiti, hate crime graffiti has happened in Oakland in 2020. It stretched across the expanse of Santa Fe Park, on the bathrooms, outside of the bathrooms, and luckily we all know the beautiful murals that have replaced those, that were also recently graffitied, I will say, and that were since remedied. The basketball court, and now in less than 4 years we've come upon this again. I think that it was unfortunate that that incredible incident that happened in 2020 never heard hide nor hair. I know that that was between the county and interim or Chief Cochran at the time, and was told there would be an investigation, but never heard hide nor hair of any of it. But thankful to community people that stood up, it was dealt with very quickly. So I think that we definitely know that this is problematic. This should be very concerning, the tenor that we have going on, even now at our local level. And I just want to say, the best wishes for this church to do the fundraising that is needed, since their bus was not insured yet, to be able to get a replacement. Also, I want to give a huge shout out to Historic North Topeka West. We had our NIA meeting last night. Any number of things was talked about, including obviously, the unsheltered and the encampments. But one thing that they voted on and they are considering is the development of a community garden. And this is very new for that district. And so people in Oakland are ready to reach out and help in any way, since we're going on our 3rd year of the community garden. And I just want to tell you, Historic North Topeka West, you can do it. I mean, believe in yourself, believe in your ability to come together, and I think that you will have amazing success. And good luck, everybody, on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor, if I could, how do you donate to the bus fund?
Councilman Dobler, I can get with Pastor Odom, since I'm set up for a conversation with them tomorrow, and I can
find out. We talked about a GoFundMe page, but they had not even considered that because they're still kind of reeling from it, but I can definitely let you know.
If you'd let us know, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to remind everybody that beginning May the 15th, kids ride the Topeka Metro free from May the 15th to August the 15th. This is their 10th year of doing that, which is awesome, so that the kids can get where they need to go. Summer school, workplace, library, swimming pool. I think it's awesome. And so I wanted just to throw that out there. I also want to first thank the mayor for setting aside time on Sunday to join us with our Topeka Way to Work. Every year, I make sure that there's money in the budget for our youth so we can employ them. This year, we've asked for partners since we couldn't find enough places in the city to give them jobs or fulfill those positions. And we have some really, really good partners this year, and we're taking it to another level. I was really excited to see we had orientation for the parents and the youth to bring to come. We taught them how to fill out an application and taught them how to tie a tie. And also how to come to the interview process and also how to interview. There was a very good participation with the parents and the youth. So to all my colleagues down there that are wearing ties, I'm going to ask next year, you have a whole year in advance, to pick out a tie. And Tony, I want a tie from you before you leave. And I want you to give it to me because I think what we're going to start doing is we have to prepare our young people. And if we don't prepare them, who's going to prepare them? And so I want one of your best ties, and I want you to give it to me to donate. These young men were so excited. They were taking 2 and 3 ties. And I want you to remember the first time that you put on a tie and how it made you feel as men, and how it just dressed you up, and it made you feel good. And we had several young men, they were trying to go get them a dress shirt so that they could wear that to that interview. So it was a lot of fun. I want to thank HR, Jackie Russell, Joy Simpson for taking their time out on Sunday. It was well worth it. We're taking it to another level. I'll be sending everybody an application. So if you talk to a young person or you know somebody, we need to get those applications in before May the 19th so we can get them employed. And also this year, city manager, you might make a note of this. I would like more money so we can employ more youth because we're going to have more partners. And we've got to start investing in our young people. And again, go through your ties. I know Spencer has some really good ties. Spencer, I'll be out to see you Saturday. I want to see what all the buzz is that you're going and talking to all your constituents. So I'm going to come out and see you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Councilman Emerson wants to know if he can donate his box of Highland Park ties.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He can take those to God's storehouse.
Councilman Emerson, it's your turn to get even.
Yeah, unfortunately, on a more somber note, in District 4 last week, I lost a fantastic, just a great guy, Fred Martinez. I don't know how many of you knew him or had the pleasure of ever knowing him, but just a pillar of the community, and just frankly, I tried to get him to run for council, and he, after my first term, and he was too smart to do that. So, just a fantastic guy, and he'll be greatly missed by everyone.
Thank you. Councilman Gill.
All right, Councilwoman Ortiz, definitely hit me up on that clothing, because since I've become pleasantly plump, I have several dress shirts that you used to see me wear at work that I can no longer wear. And then on the bus, Is there an age limit? Because I've been referred to as a man-child before. So, but definitely hit me up on that. Going on that note, spring cleaning. I've noticed a lot of people cleaning out their houses, throwing perfectly good things out on the curb. We have several places in town that will take them. We have organizations that will take specified things such as feminine products, diapers, women's undergarments, the list goes on the specific items that organizations will take. So please, if you reach out, see what's out there, who's taking what, just don't throw things in the trash. There's so many, teachers will take things. The low to moderate income, I remember when my wife and I were there, thrift stores were our jam to find stuff. So please look at donating instead of just throwing away. It keeps it out of our landfills, which then can be reused, repurposed. And finally, as the deputy mayor always says, I have to do sports. We had a local player that after the draft went on as an undrafted free agent, Ty Zettner, that played at Kansas State. He's going to the Eagles. The Chiefs selection was a K-State player, and he's actually from the Kansas City area. So it's great for a guy like that to play at home. And then a really, really special moment, Deuce Vaughn of Kansas State got the call from his father, who was working for the Cowboys and was drafted by the Cowboys. So the call usually comes for some type of coach or head coach, and it came from Deuce's father to him. So that was a nice special moment there for a K-State player to get the call from his father and then be able to talk to the owner and his coaches and talk about how great it would be having a father-son moment all season next year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay. Wait till the NBA draft.
Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we're starting the month of May, which is a little bit wild, it's just a reminder that as people are finishing up the school year, there's lots of activities and kids are going to be out of school soon. So as you're out and about, just be wary of other people's kids, of your own kids, and make sure that they are staying safe and they have a wonderful summer. Also with the month of May, it's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And I actually reached out to Sean Dixon at Visit Topeka earlier today to see if there were any events or celebrations that were going on that we should know about. And what I found out is that we need to go ahead and make sure that we're making those known. So if you are a part of an organization or are celebrating Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, whether it's in the subcontinent, in East Asia, or one of the many islands speckled throughout the Pacific, please reach out to Visit Topeka, because we want to make sure that all Topekans are really taking advantage of the fact that we're a multifaceted community and that there's so much that we can learn about each other, and that when we learn more about each other and celebrate each other, we are stronger. So please take the opportunity to reach out to Visit Topeka. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Cow? Okay. Councilwoman Hofer.
There's something I forgot. I want to thank all the city employees that went out to do the cleaning at 37th and Kansas. I did not know that was happening, and thank you for helping with the video. I don't think it got as much, I don't want to say publicity, but as much acknowledgement as it should have, because there were a lot of city employees there and it was a major task. So I appreciate everyone who volunteered and took their time to go out and help.
Thank you. On that, I would compliment our DEI director, because he was out there with his staff all day long. And I know just in the short time I was out there, you get worn out pretty quickly. I saw the chief out there. He was handing out coffee and donuts and stuff. But no, he was out there like everybody else, tugging and pulling on those heavy bags. There he goes. Exit the chief. But no, I'm glad you brought that up because the staff out there just really were working hard. I mean, Jane kept snapping the whip at me, and so everybody took their turn out there to make sure that we got things done. It's just amazing to see people come together like that so quickly and work so hard. I mean, it's encouraging, and it speaks well of our staff. So thank you for mentioning that, Councilwoman. And then I want to add a word of caution, following up on Councilman Kell's comments. If you see him rummaging through your trash, don't take any harsh action. Just let him get what he wants and then just move on.
I am a trash panda, okay? You know, when you're low income, you see something good, you go grab it. So,
and also my thanks to Councilwoman Ortiz, Jackie Russell, and Joy Renee Simpson for that Way to Work program. It was enjoyable to be out there with those youth who want to get to work. They want to find out how it is to get into the workplace. They know that they need to learn, and this program really brings them into contact with the real world. It's not like it is on a video game or TV. And I would encourage, like Councilwoman Ortiz said, let's see if we can spend a little more money on that program and expand it. So beyond that, unless there's further business, Councilwoman Valdivia Acala? Oh, the apple tree. Okay. Well, I was gifted an apple tree from Steve Cadu during the Earth Day celebration and blessing of the waters. And it's been picked up and it's at my house. It's still in the pot because I'm trying to pick the right spot to plant it because my wife is really happy to have one, and I am very pleased that I got that gift. And I just want to make sure that once we put it down, it grows, and I really appreciate that act of kindness and gift from Mr. Cadu. I did relay my thanks to him. Councilman Kell.
Yeah, I forgot to mention, I had it written down. We will be back at the city council chambers next week, correct?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Just wanted to let everyone know, because I know we have some ongoing issues with some people. We'll be attending meetings. I just want to make sure they know we're not going to be here next week, but at the council chambers.
Mm-hmm. If we can get through Quincy Street over there and get to the council chambers. Yeah. There being no further business come before this body, this meeting is adjourned. I think they're alert. You're going to get it.